Rob, the reporter from Video Store Monthly left you another message.
I don't talk to them anymore ever since they put out that hit piece.
That wasn't a hit piece. It was a 4-star review of our house-made popcorn.
Criminally low. Our popcorn is 5 stars every time.
Deliciousness dies in darkness. Welcome to Rewind Video. I'm Bob.
I'm Rob.
And we love movies. Good ones, bad ones, old ones, new ones, classic favorites, hidden gems, everything in between. Rob, you're a man who keeps up with the news.
That is my reputation around the store.
Yeah, that's how people know you.
Yes.
So if you've been tuning into the same outlets that I have, you've probably noticed that every other headline is proclaiming the death of the video store.
I mean, that is not true.
I know.
Clearly.
I mean, you see things like streaming kills video stores, the end of an era. But here we are.
You can't believe everything you see in the news.
No, you can't. I look around, I see happy customers, a thriving staff recommendation shelf.
I think anybody that is listening to the show lives somewhere where there's a thriving video store in your neighborhood. Or fairly close.
Yeah, on practically every corner.
I can't imagine a world where that isn't the case.
Yeah. It does make you wonder if there's maybe a media bias or perhaps they have it out for us or something. In any case, we did mention this staff recommendation shelf, and you and I have the noble task of keeping said shelf stocked with films that deserve our customers' attention. Each rotation brings in a new theme, and this week's theme is all about the pesky media.
No comment.
Well, this is your theme, so I hope that you have at least some rationale for why we're talking about the media tonight.
I mean, it's a pillar of our society, right? I mean, it's not always fun to deal with the media, and I guess we should be clear about what we're talking about here, because we've done a showbiz theme before,
right?
And obviously, a lot of showbiz, I guess, depending on what you consider media, all of it is media.
Yeah,
we're talking about the news media or journalism. Like we debated about what we were going to call this theme. We decided on the media, and I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that context is enough to set people straight. I'm curious, where do you get your news in 2024?
I use apps, I mean, I don't know how you feel. Like, I like apps.
Yeah, apps are good.
That's a good question. Like I have a subscription to, an actual newspaper that I get on Sundays.
Likewise.
An
actual newspaper that gets delivered to your home.
Yes.
A paper.
It's tied to an app that, but like on Sunday I get an actual newspaper and I usually read that. I check, scrolling headlines on apps. I subscribe to some newsletters. I talk to a lot of people around the video store, which I think a lot of people do at their neighborhood video store.
Of course,
talk about the news.
Yeah, it's a great way to keep up with the goings on,
especially like neighborhood stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I asked this question because media is different than it's ever been in the world, and I think we're going to touch on that tonight a little bit, but. You really have a lot of choices. You can watch the news on TV. You can get it from a newspaper like you do.
Yeah.
There are countless apps. There's an abundance of sources.
There's too much news, I think.
Yeah.
It's too easy. It's too cheap to produce the news. It's too easy to put stuff out there, and it's very hard to make money off of it.
It is.
And so the news business is cratering, and I think people are struggling to figure out how to make money off it because Google and Facebook and whoever else came in and figured out how to make all the advertising money off of the news without actually producing the news. And so I think there's a struggle going on right there. But I think they'll figure it out in some way.
I hope so. There's two interesting things at play in 2024. I think one of them is the fact that anybody can be a journalist. Mm-hmm. And, you see that on social media where we have normal people reporting the news. And I want to say that one of the first times that happened was when Sully landed the airplane in the Hudson River. And
what year was that?
I can't remember, but it was reported on Twitter before it was really reported by any of the news outlets. And it was suddenly the phase of citizen journalism was becoming the norm. And I also think that today you also have a phenomenon where there is so much opinion blended with the news, whether it's on a channel that you're watching or on social media or an app that you're reading. It's hard to disseminate sometimes the difference between what is fact and what is editorial.
Yes, and even to the point, not even that problem, but also we have the problem of just news outlets not really doing their jobs. They're not asking the questions that we want answered. So like, even take any bias out of it, they're just not getting down to the issues that people are, or like even the questions that people want answered. They're just kind of like producing entertainment that's on TV.
You can also find news that tells you exactly what you want to hear.
Yes.
And,
that's not what we do here at the Rewind Video Podcast.
No, facts. No. Only facts.
When we're behind the counter here at the store.
Yeah.
We're speaking the truth.
We are. And I think we're doing a good job this evening of celebrating news and media in the way it used to be. I think there's quite a few films tonight that look back on a world where we didn't have an abundance of outlets to seek our news, and journalism was approached in a different way.
I don't think it would be quite as interesting to watch people on Twitter all day or in their text messages, and I don't think it would be as interesting, because that's where most of journalism is happening now, and direct messages and text messages and those kinds of things. So
I think we're on the cusp of a new era, which is a little bit bewildering, with AI becoming as prevalent as it is, what role it's going to play in delivering us the news. And
yes, it's going to have some role in like gathering what people have already like reported and stuff in some way.
Yeah.
But who knows at this point?
It'll be interesting.
Can't replace the video store clerk.
No. America's first journalist.
Yes. Hey, people come here for the news.
Yes. Well, let's get started. I'd love to hear about your first pick. You've got some great ones tonight, so let's dive right in.
Okay, speaking of news, this is a new movie.
Yes.
From 2020, it is titled Bad Education. This is directed by Corey Finley, who only has 3 movies to his credit, and I think 2 of them are on the shelf, because you brought Thoroughbreds to the shelf before.
I didn't realize it was the same director.
Yeah, this is his most recent movie. This is filed under Ivy League Dreams. Here is the back of the box. The beloved superintendent of New York's Roslyn School District and his staff, friends, and relatives become the prime suspects in the unfolding of the single largest public school embezzlement scandal in American history. The tagline, "Some people learn the hard way." Yeah, it's good.
That'll do.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
That, as the back of the box says, this is the true story of this embezzlement. Roslyn is this suburban Long Island school district. This is the sort of suburb that's essentially centered around the school district. Like that's the whole reason this town exists in a lot of ways. It's like the reason people move there. It's the reason people buy houses there and their property values go up. So the administration of the district is headed by Hugh Jackman, who's the superintendent, and Allison Janney, who is one of his like assistant superintendents. Mm-hmm. We also get Ray Romano, who is the school board president.
Look at Ray showing up again in a satisfying role. For him,
a small role, satisfying. I actually wanted more of him. I don't think we got enough Ray Romano.
I agree. I never thought I'd live in a world where I'm saying I want more Ray Romano, but here we are.
Do you not like Ray Romano?
Well, I did not love Everybody Loves Raymond, and I was inundated with that at my house. My parents loved it, and I feel like it was syndicated to death.
I guess he has the kind of that shtick that maybe could be his voice. I could see but at the same time, I thought that show was funny. I didn't watch it a lot, but it
wasn't terrible.
But he's kind of grown into this very like comfortable, old guy actor.
Yeah, it's interesting. He hasn't had a leading role. He's always kind of in like a character role or a bit part, but he always does a good job.
Yeah, he's great at this. Allison Janney is like the focal point at the beginning of this movie, and as we learn more about what's happened, it's first of all, she has this like really heavy Long Island accent.
Yes.
Which is throws me off a little bit at first.
Yeah.
But it works. She makes it work.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of always happy to see her in something.
Oh, she's phenomenal.
You just know you're in steady hands when she's on screen.
Yep.
Even with a role like this, which is pretty close to tipping into parody with that accent especially. But as the movie goes along, Jackman becomes the central character in this story, and it's like slowly revealed exactly how involved he was in this embezzlement.
Yeah.
And like how deep the corruption went in this administration, which it went very deep. But this is sort of that made for HBO movie that we used to get a lot of. It's like right in that sweet spot.
Yes.
You know, it's got like this really good cast with some well-known names at the top, solid story, but it takes place on this smaller scale, so it feels like it belongs on a as a TV movie, which is what this was. This was like an HBO original when it came out in 2020. I guess this was also at the time when nothing was coming out in theaters.
Right,
so,
right.
Well, the scandal that was at the center of this is about this theft of over $11 million out of school coffers over about 8 years, which is kind of hard to fathom.
That's a lot of money.
This is not like Ohio State University, you know. This is a local school district. I think they had like a couple thousand students in the whole district.
Yeah.
You know, so like, that boggles the mind that they had that money to just go missing.
And could still survive without it.
Yeah, and like they were still paying their bills and stuff. And 26 different people were involved. They figured out eventually. So that's like well over $1 million that just vanished. So the student journalist who uncovered the story actually did break the news before any other news organization.
That's amazing.
It all happened about 2 years after the Allison Janney character was quietly let go, and the school board just was like, well, we won't mention any of this because it's going to hurt our reputation. So we're just going to let her pay back what they thought was $250,000. And so I think what happened was this the student, whose real name was Rebecca Rombom, she received from a source who I don't think she's revealed who the source was, that was like, hey, we heard this story about this assistant superintendent that got fired a couple years ago, and we think it was because she stole this like $250,000. And so it just sounds like word had somehow leaked out in like a meeting. Someone sent an anonymous letter to the school board or whatever, and eventually got to this journalist for the school paper. So whoever it was, it might have even been another student who maybe like heard something from their parents or something. Right. Who knows? And so eventually, like, the article gets published in the student paper, and like the students are like, whatever, like they could give a shit. But the story just kind of got around, and it got enough daylight that like as people around town started talking about it, and like as these things usually happen, like piercing into the cover up is what like opened up the whole story.
Yeah.
So, once it was out there, the New York Times got involved, and then like the legal authorities get involved, and then they eventually find out like, oh, like it's not just like this $250,000. It's like it's millions and millions of dollars. So it's probably something that would have got out anyway, actually. Yeah. But like, there's no doubt that this scoop by this high school journalist basically broke open this whole story.
Yes.
Because like, as far as the school board knew too, like there was only $250,000 missing. If this story doesn't go deeper, they wouldn't have even found out about that other missing money. It just never would have come up.
Unreal to think about.
It's completely unreal to think about. So this gets a 3.7 on Letterboxd, and that's in the neighborhood of my 4-star rating. I really enjoy this.
Yeah.
Letterboxd user Bethan also gives this movie 4 stars and says in her review, "What I would give to dance badly in a gay bar to avoid life's problems." And that's another thing you get in this movie. Hugh Jackman dances badly in this movie.
Which is hard for him.
That's acting.
That's acting. Yeah,
what a performance.
Yeah.
So Bad Education is my first choice this week for the topic of the media.
This one was a lot of fun. And you're right. It comes from an era when we were used to getting HBO original movies that were worth watching. They were like, tune into them. Somehow that's changed. Maybe it's when HBO transitioned to Max, and I don't know. They don't have as much television or movies that are as worth tuning into anymore.
The movie business has completely fucked themselves over in a lot of different ways over the years. And one of those ways is like they can't really decide what kind of movie is what. Like it's hard to tell what is a quote streaming movie, like what is an HBO movie, what is a TV movie.
Yep.
Nobody really knows what any of those things are.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the problem.
It's just about what studio or what streaming giant bids the highest for a movie that's out kind of available in the festival circuit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that this is a real celebration of investigative journalism, and for it to have come from a student just makes it all the more entertaining and fun to watch.
And it's a true story, and it's bizarre that something like this could happen, but it did on Long Island, of course.
Of course. Close to New Jersey. So. Yes. Well, fine pick. I'm going to take us from true stories to not true stories, but who knows, potentially.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. My first pick, also a new film, in fact, a very recent release. It's from 2024. The movie is Civil War, from the Florida Probably Started It section of the store. I'll give you the back of the box. After a fascist government takes control, a dystopian future America is torn apart by a brutal civil war. In this harrowing vision of the near future, the power of media manipulation becomes a crucial tool in the fight for control and survival. Tagline, "Welcome to the Frontline." Which I guess is working, Frontline was a news program, is still a news program, but also Frontline as it relates to a war. I see what they're trying to do.
It's a good try.
Yeah, it's a good try. This is a dystopian thriller. It comes to us by way of Alec Garland and stars Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, and Kaylee Spaney as they navigate a fragmented America that's embroiled in a civil war. And here, media plays a pivotal role in shaping public perception of the conflict. So this is being released during a time where the topic of civil war is somehow as relevant as ever. We've got, the world kind of grappling with issues of political polarization, media influence. And Alex Garland, who I saw somebody wrote a review on Letterboxd that said all of his movies could be called Annihilation, and I don't necessarily disagree. He's, of course, behind movies like Annihilation and Ex Machina. There's some speculative fiction here and, a blending of what I think is a sobering commentary on some contemporary issues. This was shot in various parts of the United States. It's all about a journey down from New York to D.C. So Garland gives this a real docu-style feel. It seems like we're actually following a journalism crew that's working on a show like Frontline. It's very candid, very fly on the wall at times. I'm somebody who loves a movie that gives us visions of a country that's in various states of decay, or a world. We get that a lot in post-apocalyptic movies.
I mean, it's not unlike a zombie movie in that way.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. This is a little different in the sense that we're not so far removed from whatever catalyzed, an apocalyptic state of things. This is the beginning of the decline. So the world is still full of people, but we do get to see pockets of America that have already been forgotten. And that was fascinating to watch every time that they move from place to place throughout their journey. Garland has described Civil War as a companion piece to his earlier film Men, which I did not see.
Me neither.
Yeah, that one didn't review as well, but he says that this is kind of positioning the story as a sci-fi allegory for the polarized state of current society. Which, yeah, sure, you definitely get that here. I mentioned a little bit of the cast already. One actor who doesn't get top billing, in fact, he's not even credited in the credits, is Jesse Plemons, who shows up as in a great part as a soldier who's...
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he was awesome. And apparently a late addition to the movie. He's married to Kirsten Dunst, and I guess whoever they had cast for that dropped out at the last second, so she volunteered him. And it was good that she did.
And he was available.
Yeah, he was available. So why did I choose this for our theme on media? I did not actually expect this movie to be about media, much less photojournalism. Yeah. When I first saw the trailers, I thought it was just a story about America in a state of civil war. But to tell the story through the lens of embedded journalists who are kind of trekking their way through a warring nation is pretty unexpected. So I like that. I think it really works.
I think a lot of people expected this movie to be about the war, and they expected characters to tell you this is what happened, and here's the history, and here's who's fighting who, where, and how, and all this stuff. And it's that's not at all what this movie's about. This movie is about journalism.
It is about journalism. And an aspect of journalism that we don't celebrate quite as much or see as the focus of a story. But who better to take an objective point of view on something like a civil war and the impact it would have on our country than people who are supposed to take an objective view on a story. So it's the right way to go. People are going to say that this is properly divorced from the political landscape in America today. But, Texas and California are allies. But I think anyone with that point of view is taking their eye off the ball, because what I see is a story that is about states rising up against a fascist president, someone who isn't afraid to kill journalists, peddle propaganda, treat citizens as enemies. And that's not at all far-fetched when you consider our previous president and the things that he talks about. And, some of the dialogue even today. So I think it makes this story as timely as ever. There's a lot of good world building, not a lot of exposition. We're just dropped in, and you're asked to just put the pieces together as you gather them. There's no narrator talking us through what happened. That. Oh, it's so much better for it.
I don't need to know what, because it would spend half the movie explaining.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, the fact that we're just following a group of people who want to chronicle what's happening is awesome. This was praised by some critics. Manola Dargis of the New York Times wrote, "Rarely have I seen a movie that made me so acutely uncomfortable or watched an actor's face that, like Dunst's, expresses a nation's soul sickness so vividly that it felt like an X-ray." This averages a 3.7 on Letterboxd. 33% of people agree with my 4-star review. I'm throwing it on the shelf because it's an election year, and I think that everyone should see a glimpse of what America could look like in a world where the wrong person takes power and does some awful things with it.
I really dug this movie, too. I think it's super good. The one thing I wished it did, especially from a media perspective, is we don't really get to see how the news is getting out to people.
Right.
Yeah. The one photographer is using film, for instance. How are her pictures getting out?
Yeah.
I guess maybe they're both using film, but either way, you don't really see how technology is impacting the journalism either, because the one guy's writing down in his notebook and stuff, but we don't really know how he's filing stories.
You have to believe that cell networks are disrupted. Yeah. Wi-Fi probably unavailable.
So are people getting their news from newspapers that are getting it 2 weeks later? That's what I wish we got more of.
There is a mention during the Jesse Plemons scene where I think the reporters describe working for Reuters. And so that tells me that, okay, well, perhaps the rest of the world is still very much intact and, it's still possible to get stories out.
But, Reuters was around before, the internet. So it's
exactly.
They filed stories somehow back then too. So I'm just curious, because this movie is not about the Civil War, it's about the media.
Yeah.
I'm just a little bit more curious how that works.
I agree with you. I would have loved to have known that. I think that there's more story to tell there. And even the way, you get a glimpse of that town that claims to be just turning a blind eye to what's going on. And so it leads you to believe that, perhaps news is hard to come by, or at the very least, some people are just choosing to ignore it.
Yeah. That actually brings me to the other point I wanted to make about this. Is I think this is thematically similar to Leave the World Behind from last year, 2023.
Oh, very much, yeah.
Because I think they both hit the themes of you like we're all implicit in this.
Yes.
Like you can't escape this.
No.
We're all, whether you think you're part of it or not, like you're stuck in it regardless.
Yeah.
Obviously this is two different ways of approaching that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it really struck me as like a companion piece to that.
Well, I'm throwing it on the shelf. I definitely think it's worth watching, and timely as ever.
Awesome. Great pick.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to keep us in this century, but go back all the way to the year 2000 with the movie Almost Famous. Filed under Rocking the Cradle.
Ooh. Not
Here's
mad.
the back of the box. In 1973, 15-year-old William Miller's unabashed love of music and aspiration to become a rock journalist lands him an assignment from Rolling Stone magazine to interview and tour with the up-and-coming band Stillwater. Tagline, experience it, enjoy it, just don't fall for it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't hate it.
Yeah, B plus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. This is Cameron Crowe's autobiographical coming-of-age classic rock dramedy about his teenage years covering bands like the Allman Brothers, Yes, and Led Zeppelin.
Boy, what a gig.
Jesus, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he graduated high school at 15, and he started working for Rolling Stone, like, I don't know, that summer, which is like fucking insane to think about. So the story in Almost Famous is a kind of a composite of all the time that he was doing that job and also kind of some stories that he had heard and maybe a few things he made up. But more than anything else, it's based on the Allman Brothers because he went on tour with them for 3 weeks when he was 16.
That's
Which I would never want to go back to be 16 years old again unless I got to tour with the Allman Brothers for 3 weeks in 1973. So that was actually his first cover story for Rolling Stone that he wrote. He was 16 years old. Wow. And I went back and read it. It's pretty good.
Yeah?
It's a real article. It's really good. I'll send you a link.
Yeah, I'd love to read it.
So as you would expect, I love the music element to this.
Yes.
That's kind of my hallmark. It always hits me right. The soundtrack is an incredible collection of classic rock.
As every Cameron Crowe movie is. I mean, he just gets it.
He gets music.
He
worked for Rolling Stone when he was 15 years old.
Yeah, the man understands.
I guess he knows a little bit about music. Yeah. But actually, so there's all this great classic rock on there, but the band Stillwater is like not bad. They're halfway decent.
Yeah, in terms of fake band names.
Yeah.
Stillwater's great.
They actually were a real band in the 70s.
Really?
It's a completely disconnected from this. I think they came to an agreement before the movie came out, and they're like, "Listen, can we just use your name? We'll give you a check, for whatever." But it's not that band. But there was a band in the '70s called Stillwater. So their songs were written by Peter Frampton, the band in the movie.
Huh.
Peter Frampton and Nancy Wilson from Heart, who was Crowe's wife at the time.
Yeah.
Also, Mike McCready from Pearl Jam played the guitar.
Really?
So, they kind of were, in a lot of ways, a real band. They do, to my ears, sound a little contemporary to be a 70s rock band. Yeah. Which, there's some 90s rock in there, obviously, literally, with, Pearl Jam's guitarist.
Sure.
But it's close enough. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
These are obviously career-defining performances from Kate Hudson and Patrick Fugit. I can't think of another role from that Kate Hudson did that anybody cares about, really.
Right.
Maybe I'm missing something.
I don't think you are.
And then this is definitely one of my favorite Philip Seymour Hoffman performances.
Oh, it's so good.
It's this is one of the roles that I think about when I think of him.
Yeah.
His Lester Bangs is he has such a passion for music and a passion for the job of writing about music. But he does have this snobbishness about him that usually would kind of bother me, especially I don't know, there's a lot of the attitude in criticism that I really get turned off by. But I think he he earns it.
I think so too.
Because he cares, he
gives a fuck.
He might not always be right, but he has his taste. He knows what he likes and knows what he doesn't like, and he can defend it. He's not, I don't know, he's not just shitting on things to shit on things. He's no, that sucks because this is better. And these guys do it right, and here's why. So Stillwater, the band, is constantly referring to William as the enemy.
Right.
Because Rolling Stone, I think they gave him like a bad review or something. I can't really remember. Or maybe just like a general disdain for the media, the music press. But like just like William has to keep himself from getting too close to the band because you don't want to like be buddies with them when you have to write an article. But also like they're not wrong to like be wary of him.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to be careful when you're talking to journalists.
Yeah.
Because like anything you say, if it's not off the record, it's fair game. And like, especially when the reporter is friendly and your guard is let down, people will say like almost anything.
And I mean, this kid's young. So like it's hard to see him as a traditional journalist in this world, but he is.
Well, that's one of the things that the guy who hired Cameron Crowe to be the journalist for Rolling Stone, he's like, the bands loved this guy, you know?
Yeah.
But this also takes place in the 70s, which is a very different media environment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
First of all, there obviously, like we talked about, there wasn't as much media as there is now. You know, there were like 5 rock magazines that, you know, that came out once a month or something. This is also a situation with the reporter embedded directly in the band, with the band on tour. And it's kind of like, I have to imagine that doesn't really happen as much anymore without like some sort of PR person in between.
Probably not.
You know, like everything's much more stage managed, much more professional, even for a band that was like, you know, not headlining. They're opening for like Black Sabbath or something.
Yeah.
But I think even a band at that level would have somebody in the middle between a Rolling Stone reporter and the band. But also nowadays, musicians, celebrities, people in general, they're just there. We are just more versed in like media.
Yes.
We understand how we come across, and we understand how guarded we have to be. We understand how to like manage a public persona better than just people in the 70s who were like never thought twice about having their image in public.
Right.
You know, or the words they say in public, which is something that like even us, but definitely people younger than us are just trained on from birth.
Yeah.
You know, so the relationship in general of people with the media is completely different than it was back then.
So different.
I did want to bring up the Mick Jagger joke from this movie.
Yeah.
That Jimmy Fallon says, where he's like, you know, you don't think Mick Jagger is going to be still like dancing around on stage at age 50, right?
Right.
And I think in the year 2000, the idea was like, ha ha ha. Mick Jagger is, how old was he back then? 60?
60, yeah.
60 something?
Yeah.
Of course, isn't it funny that they would think that?
Right.
But that joke hits differently in a couple ways nowadays. Like, obviously, he's 80 something now, I think.
Yeah.
Or close to 80 at the very least.
He probably
Let's say
passed
80.
it.
Yeah, probably past 80. He's still doing it.
Yeah.
He's still doing it.
Yeah.
So, like, that's one thing that's changed about that joke. But I think also, like, especially now, the idea of somebody not doing that job at 50 is also ridiculous.
Completely insane.
Like nowadays, you're like, how old is Beyonce?
Oh, she's
got to be. She's definitely in her 40s. Like, can you imagine Beyonce? Like, can you imagine somebody saying like, "Well, Beyonce's not going to be doing this at 50."
Right.
Like, no, of course she is. Like, who wouldn't be doing it at 50?
Look at half the acts on half the artists who have residencies in Vegas. I mean, 50 is like the youngest.
Nobody retires at 50 from this business.
Right.
You know, and it's just it's a ridiculous idea nowadays. Where in 2000 it was like, it makes sense that people would say that.
Right.
Like now it wouldn't even make sense to say that.
No. Yeah.
So this is Almost Famous. It's at 4.0 on Letterboxd. I just bumped this up to 5 stars.
Yeah.
On this rewatch, I watched it. I gave it 4 stars. I thinking to myself, I'll give it 5 stars next time. Then after a day or two, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, why not? So yeah, it's up to 5 stars for me. And I didn't find any great 5-star review, anything that funny. All of the other 5-star reviews, there were a lot that were along the lines of something like, I never watched this before. I put it off for so long. Like, there were so many reviews of people who were like,
really?
I avoided this movie for 20 years.
Why?
You know what? I thought about that, and I don't think there's any reason to avoid it.
Yeah.
But I think it, like, when at first glance, if you don't really think about it, you're like, it's okay. It's just kind of like a dumb like romantic comedy with rock in the back. And if you don't care about 70s rock and roll,
Yeah,
know?
what's going to pull you in?
But I think this is just like an all-time vibes movie.
Yeah. It
You
very
know,
much is.
and if you're into that 70s rock and roll vibe at all, definitely you're gonna love this movie.
You're going to love this.
So maybe there are some people out there that haven't seen this movie, and maybe they've passed it by, but don't pass this movie by. It's fucking great.
I remember seeing this when it came out and really liking it. I maybe have seen it twice since, and the most recent time was this. It's still 4 stars for me, but I could see it getting bumped up. One thing that struck me, and it had been a while since my last rewatch, so I was a little taken aback by this, is that music journalism, just in general, has all but gone away. And it used to be such a big thing. I remember having my subscription to Rolling Stone and reading it the day that it arrived in the mailbox growing up. And then there were other magazines like Spin and Metal Edge and Circus, and it was prevalent. And I don't know what happened, but like that was also how I relied on finding out what albums were on the horizon that I should check out, or even like what bands I hadn't heard of that I should listen to.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just that streaming has changed the way people digest music. But
Pitchfork is still out there.
Pitchfork is.
But like that's not journalism. That's not what this is.
That's
that's like reviewing stuff, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Rolling Stone's still doing something. I don't really know. I don't read it anymore, but
they are. I mean,
do they cover music anymore?
I would say it's more of a pop culture magazine than it is. I mean, maybe pop culture is the wrong word, but there's as much entertainment and politics in Rolling Stone. I mean, Rolling Stone's political journalism is as relevant as it's ever been, which is relevant in the world as ever. But like it wasn't always that way.
Right. They always did a little bit of it. I mean,
a little bit, yeah.
They had Hunter S. Thompson and whatnot going back to the 70s and stuff. But like I don't know. I don't know how closely they cover the music scene. Like we said before, though, it's different now. It's like it's not you're not covering it the same way as you used to.
I don't think people are picking up a Rolling Stone or subscribing to it now, or even clicking on it online because they're seeking music journalism, and that feels crazy to me.
Yeah.
I miss. This reminded me of something that I very much missed.
Yeah, I do miss the days of music magazines and stuff. I used to read Spin magazine.
Oh, sure.
I grew up on that. But yeah, Almost Famous going up on the staff recommendation shelf for the media.
This was a fun one. I am going to 1999 with my next pick, and the movie is The Insider. And it comes from the How Great Are Fax Machines section of the store. We've got a fax machine in our store.
We do.
Yeah. And I'm glad that this movie reminds the world that fax machines.
I mean, it's holding up the documentary shelf. We don't actually fax anything.
Right. But we could plug it in.
So we absolutely
We
could.
might have some faxes waiting for us if we just put it into the wall.
What's the difference between a fax machine and emailing a PDF? I still haven't figured that out.
I can't tell you. Color? So, back of the box synopsis for The Insider. After seeking the expertise of former Big Tobacco executive Jeffrey Wigand, seasoned TV producer Lowell Bergman suspects a story lies behind Wigand's reluctance to speak. As Bergman persuades Wigand to share his knowledge of industry secrets, the two must contend with the courts and the corporations that stand between them and exposing the truth, all while Wigand must struggle to maintain his family life amidst lawsuits and death threats. Tagline here is, warning, exposing the truth may be hazardous. Pretty good.
Yeah, fairly clever.
Yeah.
We got a lot of like be something taglines this week.
Yeah, it's not bad.
None of them are that bad.
So this is Michael Mann's look at the tobacco industry and the whistleblowing that took place around revealing some of the dangers of smoking. And we get Russell Crowe here as Jeffrey Wigand, Al Pacino as Lowell Bergman. And yeah, a lot of journalism, a lot of corporate interests. The personal integrity component is present. This was adapted from Marie Brenner's 1996 Vanity Fair article called The Man Who Knew Too Much. And the film does a good job of pretty meticulously reconstructing the events surrounding Jeffrey Wigand's whistleblowing on Big Tobacco and the subsequent airing of his story on 60 Minutes. So lot of research went into really accurately portraying some of the legal and ethical battles that Wygant and Bergman faced. And yeah, we get doses of Louisville, Kentucky, Mississippi, various sites in New York here. Michael Mann, definitely a good pick for this, I think. He's great at some atmospheric storytelling.
It's been on the shelf a couple of times.
Yeah. Brings a sense of realism to The Insider. So this is kind of highlighting some of the risks of investigative journalism and especially whistleblowing. It's talks a lot about the importance of truth and integrity. Some of the shots throughout this movie, weirdly tight.
Yes, that's true.
There's some handheld filmmaking and a lot of weird tight shots. The movie, I think you could describe this as meandering at times. I know that it's meant to create a mood and call attention to how slow a story like this can unfold, but I could see how some people might lose a little patience with this. The runtime is, just over 2.5 hours?
Yeah, close to 240. I don't know. It's long. I don't think it's the pace is fine. I mean, to me, it never drags.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a big story to tell and a lot that unfolds.
I mean, if you took off 15 minutes, I wouldn't get pissed off about it. But I don't know what you'd cut necessarily.
You couldn't turn this into a 90-minute movie and still tell the same story. So Russell Crowe was nominated for an Oscar for his performance here. He's unusually vulnerable in this part. Unexpected for Little Russ. Little Russ at this time.
Regular-sized Russ.
Regular-sized Russ.
I don't know how I feel about him in this part. I liked him better in the second half when he started getting a little bit more angry, a little bit more animated. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I buy him in the first half when he's kind of schlubby and meek.
Yeah. It's shades of his part in A Beautiful Mind almost.
Yeah, I mean, man, he's just bursting with an energy that does not fit that at all.
Yeah.
And so to see regular-sized Russ trying to be this nerdy scientist.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad performance. I'm just saying I didn't buy him as much when he was
at the beginning.
Before he once he got angry, I'm yes.
Yeah.
Give him a little bit of energy. I buy this when he has some more juice, but when he was being kind of I don't know, the lame dad, I'm
yeah.
Russ is never the lame dad.
No. So Al Pacino plays Lowell Bergman. He's the 60 Minutes producer who champions Wygant's story. Feels like there is no coke whatsoever running through Pacino's veins in this film, which is bewildering.
He is actually he's at the perfect level.
Yes. Yeah.
He's so controlled.
It's not a caricature.
Yeah, and this is also a top-notch movie for Pacino for when he's really up high and he brings it down real close and he's I'm going to tell you something from the heart.
Yes.
And it's top-notch that Pacino.
It's so good. I mean, he's great. And we get a ton of screen time with him in this, so that was really enjoyable. But also Christopher Plummer is amazing as Mike Wallace.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, Wallace in this story is kind of caught in a crossfire between journalistic integrity and network interests. And
also his reputation.
Oh, he was a Goliath in his day.
Yeah. And he's I'm not going out.
Yeah.
unless it's on my terms.
Right. And I love that he is as confident as he appears in this. And, we're familiar with his role as an interviewer on shows like 60 Minutes, but I've heard that behind the scenes, he is exactly the way Christopher Plummer plays him in this. He's a guy who believes in the power of news and the importance of proper journalism, and I love that. So why did I choose this for our theme? This is I think it's a compelling exploration of media's role in uncovering and disseminating the truth. There's a lot of good journalism at play here. And even when faced with high stakes and ethical dilemmas, it prevails, which I think is just a wonderful story to tell. We get some great scenes here. There's a courtroom scene where Wygant is telling his story in a Mississippi court, which is phenomenal. There's some great acting there. There's also just the moment where the CBS executives are trying to decide whether to air his interview is just powerful.
It shows the tension between the business and the news side too.
Yeah.
And there's a sale of the company happening at the same time, which is
Yeah.
adding all this other pressure.
Yeah.
But I do love how they're just like, we are newsmen and this is what we do. And is it
Yes.
true? We're going to report it, period.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I love that attitude.
Yeah. The idea, I mean, they talk a lot about, we have a story to tell. Why would we bend to the, will of corporate interests? But it was definitely there. I like that this reminds us of a time before Twitter, YouTube, and social media, before it was possible to just circulate videos and points of view and to a broad audience with ease. It's a reminder that once the only way to get news was by way of a newspaper or programs like 60 Minutes, and trust mattered.
Yeah,
And
it did.
you get so much of that. Wallace talks a lot about being the most trusted news source in America, which at the time, they were.
There's also points in this movie when they're talking about, they talk to people at the Wall Street Journal and they talk to people within 60 Minutes and they're talking about different stories and whatnot. And they say things like, oh, we'll push it off for a week.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that happens nowadays.
Oh, no.
Like, we're going to hold on to something for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Like, I mean, not to this level. There's no way.
No, there's no way it would happen. And I mean, even if this,
Maybe like a whistleblower thing, I guess that kind of makes sense.
Maybe.
Because there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes going on.
Yeah.
But I feel like, for a lot of stuff, people are just like, we found out, like, we're not going to check it even if it's true. We're going to put it out there.
right. I mean, I found myself wondering as this unfolded, 60 Minutes is deciding to sit on this interview, and there's no other way for it to get out into the world. Today, somebody could just leak this to YouTube or put it on social media, and the world would see it.
Or
rather than
the
network
Russell
wanted
Crowe
to.
character would just like put out a thread of posts.
Yeah.
And be like, here's my story.
Yeah, here it is. Take it in. Yeah. But you hit on something interesting about this, which is just the trust that also seems to exist between journalists in different outlets, even journalists working in different forms of media. The fact that a guy from 60 Minutes is calling a journalist at a Wall Street Journal, and they know each other, and they understand. Okay, well, I need to listen to what this guy is saying, and that's great. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's great to see like the inner workings
Yeah.
of the media.
And I want to believe that it was like that. I'm sure it's different today, but
I'm sure there's a little bit of that still at the top.
yeah. So this was pretty critically acclaimed. It earned 7 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director for Michael Mann, Best Actor for Russell Crowe. I was surprised by how many reviews I saw claiming that this is Michael Mann's best. I would say that it's not as good as Heat, definitely better than Miami Vice, but not his best. It's close to the top for me.
Okay.
This averages a 4.0 rating on Letterboxd, and that's exactly what I give it.
Sounds right on to
35%
me.
of users agree. The user, the River Jordan, had an interesting take that mentions another of tonight's picks, which we're about to get to. He said, seeing a true story scandal from the point of view of a whistleblower might now be routine, but The Insider was the first to bring the perspective to mainstream cinema. It's All the President's Men in reverse. Even Al Pacino's role as a TV producer is minimal in favor of leaning the whole narrative on Russell Crowe's Wygand, which I thought was an interesting take.
Yeah.
Yeah. So throwing it on a shelf, it's my second choice for
Good
the
pick.
media.
Good pick. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll get right into it.
Yeah.
I'm going to 1976, All the President's Men.
There it is.
There it is. This is directed by Alan J. Pakula, who also did Presumed Innocent, which was also on the shelf before. He did The Parallax View, too, which is another sweet movie from the 70s.
I did not see that.
Maybe I'll bring it to the shelf one day.
Perhaps.
You can find this in the bureaucratic burglaries section of the store. Here's the back of the box. Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein uncover the details of the Watergate scandal that leads to President Richard Nixon's resignation. Tagline, the most devastating detective story of this century.
Fact.
Facts. Yeah. Again, gets the job done.
Yes.
We get a lot of right down the middle taglines tonight.
Yeah.
This is based on Woodward and Bernstein's book of the same name, which I just recently read, and it's fantastic.
I need to give that a read.
It's written like a fictional detective novel. It's just like a really quick read. It's like a beach read.
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't expect from a nonfiction book about White House crime.
Right.
It's kind of crazy how fast this all turned around because the Watergate break-in was June of 1972. Nixon resigned in August of 1974. This movie was out in April of 1976.
That's
You
crazy
know,
fast.
and I think the book came out in 1973 or 4, like maybe like before Nixon resigned. I can't really remember. But it's like, I can't imagine, like, it's just so weird to imagine there's an audience for like recent history like that. Obviously, this was like such a huge story. I can't imagine a story nowadays with like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like people would want to hear about it 2 years later.
No, I agree with you. It's interesting because this was my introduction to Watergate. So, you know, in high school, our history classes, at least as best as I remember them, never took us that close to recent history.
Yeah,
and so
because the books were too old.
Right, yeah. And so I was aware of Watergate, but I never understood it until seeing this.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I learned it in school. Probably not, like you. I definitely don't remember what I learned in school anyway. I mean, I learned the details of it like later as an adult, and this movie was part of it for sure.
Yeah.
But you can also tell this movie was pretty much made for an audience that had like, 1, probably read the book, and 2, definitely knew this story because everybody had lived through it because it happened 2 years before. You know, to me, this is an all-time process movie. So like we go with the reporters through every step of the process as they're putting this story together. You know, they're not only doing like the actual the reporting, they're also like going through the politics of the newsroom, also the politics of the newspaper dealing with the government, and like how the news business deals with like the responsibility of what they're doing. Because they're like, we could bring down the president, we could destroy this newspaper, and everything in between is a possibility.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot on the line here. And the Watergate story, like it was really put together piece by piece.
Yeah.
You know, these guys they gathered little scraps of information, like literally from like a variety of these different sources, and like none of it really amounts to much on its own. But they knew there was something more there, because they're like, okay, there's this break-in, and it's at the Democratic headquarters. These guys have a lawyer that they didn't call. And one of them used to work for the CIA. Okay, like there's something happening here.
Right.
Like, so they had to just like put together this stuff like a little bit by little bit, but they couldn't really tell what was going on.
No. Nevertheless, it's peak journalism. I mean, every journalism major I knew in college was shown this movie at the start of their, their classes.
It's the gold standard of journalism movie.
Yes.
And like it also was like this era. This was just a couple years after the Pentagon Papers, and then you had the Watergate story. Like it defined the news media in this country for a long time. Yeah. Especially like within the news media. You know, like, this is the story the media told themselves about what they were. And I think a lot of that has to do with because of this movie, because everybody wanted to be Woodward and Bernstein. And like because of the Watergate scandal, a lot of people became journalists. They went to college and they're like, I'm going to do that. I want to be like those guys in the movie. Yeah. But these guys were on the ground reporters. They were at the city desk. You know, they were used to like literally pounding the pavement.
And then they were forced into a role of detective where, they essentially needed to put together this story. Yeah.
And that is kind of what a journalist is, right? They're a detective without any authority.
I think this makes journalism seem a lot sexier than it usually is. It definitely can be this.
It definitely can be. I mean, it was this for these guys. It was
this.
But you also don't quite get in this movie. They don't really like get across like how boring this was, I'm sure.
Oh,
this developed over a year.
Yeah.
This developed over like the presidential election happened while this story was developing.
Yeah.
And like a lot of and you see it in some scenes in this movie where the editors are like, who fucking cares about this? Does anybody
Right.
give a shit? Like
Right.
none of this means anything. It's just some dumb like burglary.
Yeah.
You know, and like these guys are like, no, we're finding stuff out. Like we got to like stick with the story, and they stuck with it for a year.
Yeah.
Or however long it was. It was a long time.
It reminded me a lot of the Spotlight story.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you know, it took a long time to really get to the bottom of this.
So these
But it was
guys,
worth it.
yeah, for sure. So these guys talk to everybody they can. They make a lot of phone calls that like go nowhere. Like that's what this job is. But they're just like trying things, and they start pulling these threads like any good reporter would do. And like the more they pull, the story starts to like come together. They start to notice some connections, and it doesn't help that everybody they talk to is like kind of willing to give them some information, but it's always incomplete, and nobody will go on the record.
Right,
you
right,
know? So like they start to figure out like something's happening here, or they start to figure out what is happening, but they don't have any like facts that they can report. You know,
Yeah.
so it's like it's the difference between like knowing something is true and being able to put it in the newspaper.
Right.
You know, and like
right.
there's that tension between these guys and that too the whole time, because they're like, we know these guys are involved, but like we need somebody to tell us that, but they
Yeah.
won't say it because everybody above them is so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, but there is something cool about this style of reporting, like, you know, scraps of paper, like all of a sudden finding yourself in a conversation and be like, I got to find something to write this down on, you know, because now you'd be like, cool, I'll just open my notes app and whatever, like there it is. But these guys are like grabbing for napkins, matchbooks, whatever they can write shit down on.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that in Almost Famous.
Yeah.
When he's like, here's my pile of notes, you know, and there's a definitely a Hunter S. Thompson quality of that, of like, you know, the madman writer,
Yes.
like throwing something together, which is like how you would had to do it back then. You know, there wasn't any other way to take your notes.
It's true.
But I don't think I would like the old 70s newsrooms.
No, they seem stressful.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're filled with smoke.
Yes.
Filled with smoke, and like the loud ass typewriters going all day.
Yep.
They're, you know, I don't know. Computers are better. Typewriters are just too loud.
Yeah,
There's too much going on.
Agree.
And you're supposed to be working and like making phone calls in this environment. That's not going to work.
Oh, yeah.
But I got to say, this is a top-notch notebook and like pens and pencils movie.
Oh, 100%.
You got like steno pads and reporters' notebooks, which I'm a huge fan of now. But yeah, like felt tip pens, number 2 pencils, like all the good stuff. Like you get tons of that in this movie, and like
Yes.
that's a big part of being in the media. Is you got to have the right tools.
It makes you want to subscribe to a Field Notes subscription.
Yeah, I mean, there's this. I mean, in addition to all the random scraps of paper that these guys are writing on,
Yeah.
great notebooks.
Oh, great
A+,
notebooks,
A+.
yeah.
So yeah, this is a 4.2 on Letterboxd overall, which I think is about right. Letterboxd user Mulaney's 4-star review reads, I'm just going to read the stage direction here. Whispers. I've seen this movie twice and I still don't really understand the Watergate scandal, and at this point I'm too afraid to ask. Which I gotta say is probably a weak point of this movie.
Yeah.
I think if you don't already know some of these details, it's a little inscrutable.
Yeah. That's fair.
And even like, I don't know, some of this stuff is hard to figure out anyway, because even reading the book, like a lot of these guys are all named John. Like half of them are named John or Bob, and they all have these like Midwestern you know what I mean? Like these Midwestern like white guy names.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like it's hard to get people straight, and you're like, you know, so like it's hard to figure this out unless you kind of know what's happening.
Agreed.
And also the ending is like, you're like, what is this? Kind of ends.
Oh,
you know?
I mean, The Insider was the same way. It's
Yeah.
often I think stories like this can feel anticlimactic,
Yeah.
even though for the people involved in the story, it's like, finally.
Yeah. Right. But even like All the President's Men kind of ends on a defeat for these guys.
Yeah.
And they kind of just ended on like, well, they're just going to keep working. And then they like, yeah, eventually they got Nixon, which they did.
Yeah.
And so I think, I mean, it doesn't really bother me because I know the story. But I think if you're watching this from just as a movie, maybe that will throw you off a little bit. But, you know, I still think this is a fantastic piece of American history. And so it's going up on the staff recommendation shelf this week for the media.
You know, I couldn't help but to think as I was watching this, every presidency has its scandal. You know what I mean? Like Reagan had his, and all the way through present day, there's something going on big during a presidency.
Big or pretend big.
Yeah. But boy, the salaciousness of scandals has evolved in a big way. I mean, Watergate just seems tame by comparison when you look at things that have happened since, even though it was hugely significant at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the actual crimes involved were pretty egregious, I think, and also
For sure.
I don't know. The more I learn about Richard Nixon, it's kind of hard to believe that people were voting for this guy. He was
absolutely.
a real dirtbag. But,
Yeah.
I mean, then again, we see who people vote for nowadays. So
Yeah. It's perhaps not so surprising.
yeah.
Well, fine pick. This was a great one to revisit. I am going to buck the trend of bringing a downer as my third movie.
Nice.
Since I've maybe checked that box twice already with my first two films, here's something completely different. I'm going back to 2004, plucking something from the old wooden ships section of the store, and my film is Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
Wonderful.
Back of the box, it's the 1970s, and San Diego super sexist anchorman Ron Burgundy is the top dog in local TV. But that's all about to change when ambitious reporter Veronica Corningstone arrives as a new employee at his station. Tagline, they bring you the news so you don't have to get it yourself. Which
I mean, it's a joke.
Yeah,
it's good.
it's
I
great.
love it.
Yeah.
Best one tonight.
Yeah. So this is the Adam McKay classic, starring Will Ferrell as the eponymous Ron Burgundy. The film plops us into the world of 1970s broadcast journalism, and it is highlighting in a very funny way the sexism that was prevalent in the industry at that time. So while still at Saturday Night Live, Will Ferrell and Adam McKay began working on a script titled August Blowout, which Ferrell described as Glengarry Glen Ross meets a car dealership.
I mean, Glengarry Glen Ross was like not that far removed from a car dealership anyway. They were selling timeshares.
Right. Apparently, like this script was in development. Paul Thomas Anderson volunteered to kind of shepherd it into studio hands as long as Ferrell and McKay were behind it. Eventually, August Blowout evolved into Anchorman after Will Ferrell saw an interview with the 70s Anchorman talking about how sexist they were, and it was that tone of voice that he fell in love with. It was like, I got to make this movie.
Yeah.
Apparently, an early version of this script was a parody of the disaster film Alive, where a group of news people were on a plane. Ron Burgundy crashes that plane, and they're stranded in the wilderness trying to make their way back to civilization.
Well, I don't know if you're going to get into this at all, but the original, I mean, they shot like so much of this movie that wasn't in the movie.
Yeah.
Who knows? Like, I think they released like an entirely other movie of the outtakes, which is like an hour and a half long.
It's called Wake Up Ron Burgundy.
Yeah.
It came out the same year, and it was just like extra stuff that they had.
Yeah. Well, I think they just shot so much stuff. They're like, we don't even know what we're making here.
Right.
And they're just like, we'll figure something out. And then this is what they came up with. Right. And then the rest of the stuff, they're like, that's just a different movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much improv here, which, makes sense with Will Ferrell's background, Adam McKay, their work on Saturday Night Live. And yeah, you nailed it. They ended up releasing a direct-to-video companion piece. But it's no surprise when you consider who's in this. I mean, Will Ferrell is Ron Burgundy, of course. Paul Rudd, Steve Carell, and David Koechner are the news team. Veronica Corningstone is Christina Applegate. But we get cameos and supporting roles from Chris Parnell, Fred Armisen, Katherine Hahn, Fred Willard, Vince Vaughn, Jack Black, Ben Stiller, Tim Robbins, even Seth Rogen is in a very small role. It's like this is a fucking all-star cast.
It's amazing.
Top to bottom. Why did I choose this? I fucking love this movie.
You don't have to justify it.
It's my favorite Will Ferrell film. It's my favorite character of his.
Yeah.
And I mean, after 20 years, I just can't stop laughing at it. Every scene is funny in this.
It's funny. It's so funny.
Yeah. And I mean, I know this movie isn't trying to be serious at all. As much of a caricature as Ron Burgundy is, there is a lot that's not far from the truth regarding sexism in the newsrooms in the 1970s.
Yeah.
It's also great to just be reminded of how funny Steve Carell was before he started taking on serious parts. I mean, when he's doing comedy, the man is just a riot.
Yeah, I think his performance in 40-Year-Old Virgin is like, next
all-time
level.
classic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Paul Rudd was and always will be great. Nobody's off their game here. This is one of the most quotable movies that has been released. One of the most quotable in our lifetime.
Definitely.
I mean, it's just part of the vernacular. Everybody knows an Anchorman quote. Even though we haven't seen a sequel since 2013's Anchorman 2, the Burgundy character just never goes away. I mean, Farrell brought him back for this year's roast of Tom Brady. He's still present.
I think it's funny that you said that he watched like an old video of a 70s newsman and based his character on that, because it seems like because you know how news people have a cadence about them.
Yeah,
they just have a way that they talk. They have to like have a persona and this artifice, and like they just have like a cadence about them. It's like he took that and turned it into a whole character.
Yeah,
that thing that news people are. It's like that is the whole character.
Yeah, the way they talk, their hair.
He doesn't have an internal life at all.
No.
You know, like he's just that. The haircut and the way he talks, and and the suit.
Yes,
and it's kind of great. I mean, it is great.
I had a friend in college who went on to be a local news person, and you
can spot them at birth.
You can, the hair was otherworldly, and that way of that dialect just does
non-regional diction.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. Like it's just how these people talk.
Yeah. That's why not to interrupt you, but that's why when you see people who are actors playing newscasters in movies, you're like, I don't buy that.
Right.
But when they hire the actual newscasters, it's perfect. It's every time because they literally are a different breed of people.
Yes, they truly are.
They might be lizard people.
I love that this movie goes all in on being silly and isn't afraid to just have that be its thing.
We're gonna have a throwdown between news people in the streets. Yes.
Fuck yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just a hilarious movie.
I wish McKay was still going like for hard comedy.
Oh yeah, I wish he was still interested in this.
I think a movie like what was the last one? Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
I think a movie like that. I think if it really went for hard comedy, it would have gone over better than it did.
I agree. I mean, this is he still has comedic sensibilities. I mean, this is the guy that brought us Vice.
Yeah.
And there are elements of all of his recent films that are still funny, but just give us comedy.
Yeah. Plus, Anchorman had something to say.
Anchorman did have something to say.
You know, it's not a movie without its themes or issues that it's hitting.
Right.
But it's funny as fuck.
Exactly.
And I think he's better at that.
So Anchorman was well received by audiences, but it's definitely become a cult classic. On Letterboxd, it averages a 3.5 rating, but this is a 5-star movie for me. 8% of users agree with that 5-star rating. I brought a review by Jiffy Hippie to accompany my recommendation of Anchorman, and Jiffy Hippie gave Anchorman a 1-star rating and said, "Wasn't funny in the slightest. Fuck off."
Give me his address.
Yes. There's a lot of people who came to this late, and you see a lot of 2-star reviews on Letterboxd, and I definitely think that this was a movie. This type of comedy was perhaps more relevant
this
when
definitely
it was released.
Almost defined the comedy of that era.
Yeah.
We're old. I mean, let's be honest, we're old.
Yeah.
So if you're 19 years old and you fire up Anchorman in 2024, I don't know. I mean, I think some people will like it, but I'm not sure that everyone's going to like it.
It definitely hits different in 2024 if you're going at it for the first time, but boy,
that's the way comedy is, though.
Yeah, that's the way comedy is.
It doesn't mean this movie's not great.
This will always be a classic for me. Well, that's a wrap on our recommendations against the theme of media. I think if you want to write a story on tonight's episode, it might open with a headline, Shocking Revelations, Video Store Clerks Expose 6 Media Movie Gems, or something to that effect, right?
Might want to work on that lead.
Okay. Yeah, we'll give it another shot. This, journalism is not my thing.
Yeah.
But what are those 6 movies? Well, we brought Bad Education to the shelf, Civil War, Almost Famous, The Insider, All the President's Men, and Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
Find us on the internet at rewindvideopod.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and review the show.
Do that. Do all those things.
All those things. We love it.
Yeah. Give us your thoughts. Next time, we're peering into our crystal ball and looking forward into the future.
In the year 2000.
Yes. And that episode will happen in the future. It'll be released in the future. So,
and I mean,
right.
Yeah, when you listen to it, it won't be the future, but now it's in the future.
Now it's in the future, yes. And the movies we pick will probably still take place in the future.
I think that's what we're going for.
That's probably it.
I guess we'll find out.
As usual, we'll have 6 films to recommend. In the meantime, feel free to hit us up for a movie to watch, and we will see you next time.
Be kind. Recommend. Hail Satan.